Okay, so we left it where we get this list of what's inside of this message, right? It's not showing the actual message itself. In fact, it's not showing any of the other messages other than just this one. So I'm going to change this ever so slightly to actually iterate through all of the actual items inside of our inbox. We're going to iterate through that entire thing, and then we're going to eventually store those items into its own file on our local computer so we can take a look at those things. We're also going to print out what's in them so we can see those things ever so slightly. That way we could work with it in Python if we wanted. But the main part here is we're going to download these emails and put them into our actual local computer so we can see those things as well. And this will also be true for images. We'll actually be able to get the images too. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just basically tab all of this stuff in. And of course, instead of most recent and oldest, we're just going to get rid of that and we'll do for message, or I should say for item in inbox item list. And now we're going to iterate through all of that. So item is going to take place of oldest, and then raw email is still taking that email data. And then now we've got that email message. Okay, so this right here, all of this is still going to stand, but this time I'm just going to say to and to underscore and then from underscore and then subject underscore equals to that. So that's what we'll have here. Okay, so now that we've got this stuff, we actually want to see what is in this message completely. That is, we want to be able to get all of the parts of this message, right? If you remember back in the last one, this gave us 2 parts, which in some cases our email message will have 2 parts. In other cases, it'll just have 1, right? So we want to be able to go through all of those parts. It's really simple. We do for part in email message dot walk. So the dot walk part is actually going to go through that email message itself. So this part is, well, it's going to make more sense once we actually get there, but this is part of the email. Now, if you remember how we did those attachments and we added parts to it, this is what we're saying. So we had that plain text part, and then we added an HTML part, and that what made it a multi-part message. So we can actually run a conditional here and say if part.get content main type is equal to multi-part, we can just say continue. So it's going to basically just continue this for loop itself. We could break it here if we wanted to. We could write break, and that will break the for loop, but we're going to go ahead and continue the for loop on. And in here now, we want to do a couple things. First off, we want to get the file name. So we're going to just kind of guess if there's a file name. So part.get file name. Good chance that there will not be a file name. So we'll just say if not file name. And then we will make our extension, or we're going to have to guess the extension. For now, I'm just going to put HTML. We'll come back to that. And then I'll just say file name is equal to, and we're going to do message dash part dash, and I'll do %08D %S. I'll explain that in a moment. And then we'll do %. This is string substitution here. And we want to have some sort of counter of what parts are in this particular message. So I'll just put counter equals to 1. So if there's 10 parts, then it'll show those 10 parts. If there's 1 part, it'll show 1 part. If it's 2 parts, it'll show that. So we're just going to put that counter in here. And then we're going to want it to have our actual extension, whatever that's going to be. In this case, we put ext, and actually it should be .html. So this is going to do a digit substitution. So %08D substitutes counter to being digits. So this is going to be 8 digits long. So it's going to be 8 zeros and then our last digit, whatever that's going to be. And then our extension, which is .html, that's what we're going off of right now. Of course, it's not necessarily always going to be the case, which we will come back to fix that. But now that we've got that, after the file name, we'll just do counter plus equals to 1, because again, if there's multiple parts, we're going to want to update that counter each time that there are multiple parts, so the file name changes accordingly. So this file name, we want to save it. So I'm going to go ahead and write just a little note here and just say save file. We will come back to that. Right now, we aren't going to do that just yet. Instead, what we're going to do is we'll say if we're going to set a content type equals to part.get content type. So the content type of the message, we could see what those content types are by just doing print content type. So I'll leave it here for a second, and I'm just going to print out the subject and the content type. So we can actually iterate through all of this stuff and actually see it. So let's go ahead and copy everything. I'm not going to create this new folder, so I will comment that part out, and I also will not list out all the folders. But everything else I do want to copy, so I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And we are going to go into our terminal and type out Python, paste it all in, and we get name subject is not defined because we used subject underscore. Little mistake there, sorry about that. Copy this, paste it in, and we see that we're going to get access for less secure apps has been turned on. That's our subject. And then we've got text.html. Save file. This right here is coming through from this little comment here. So if I just make it a comment instead of triple quotes, it won't look the same. Okay, so we've got access. That's our subject. And then our actual content type, which is text/HTML. And we go through here and we see plain, and then we see JPEG. So JPEG, there is an image that's attached to one of these emails. So that means we're going to want to actually adjust for that. Before we do that, I'm just going to come in here and say if plain is in this content type, then we're going to just print out the part.get payload. So if plain text is in the content type, just as we saw right here, we're going to print out what that looks like. And then elif will say HTML in content type. Well, I'm going to just say print do some beautiful soup. And then otherwise I'll print out, or whoops, we'll do else, and then I'll just print out the content type. So we're just kind of separating out what's going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and try that one more time. Iterate through everything. And it's going to come through and say, first thing, this one's going to be HTML, and we need to do some beautiful soup to it. A few of them are, and then finally we see SMS from 40404, text plain text, and it just says notifications are off, and so on, right? So text plain text is really easy to read, as we see here, because we went through it and we can actually now see what's inside of this text. So then you could go any further and kind of understand what's going on with this by parsing that data a little bit further. But now we see there's images, and we have these HTML things. So we need to store both of those things locally, otherwise we might have some issues, which let's actually take a look at what it will be like with using BeautifulSoup. Now, if we go ahead and exit out of this, and we do pip install BeautifulSoup 4, and let's go back in to our Python client. And since we're doing this, I'm just going to bring it to the very top and say pip install BeautifulSoup 4. And in here, we'll do from BS4 import BeautifulSoup 4, and we want to make sure that we have, it's actually just BeautifulSoup. There we go. So we're going to do some BeautifulSoup stuff in this HTML. So I'll just do HTML underscore is equal to part.get payload. So this is actually HTML content from this payload itself. And then we'll just say soup equals to BeautifulSoup, and that's HTML underscore, and this is HTML.parser. So that's going to parse out that soup information, and then the text will be soup.get text. So that parses, that gets rid of all of the HTML tags, and now we're just going to go ahead and print out that specific text. And for now, I'm going to go ahead and pass on the plain text as well as the other stuff. So it's just going to ignore it basically. So the only text that we should see is the subject of each one. In fact, let's only see the subject of the HTML, and that's it. So let's get rid of the extra spacing. I'm going to copy this, paste it in here. Oops, we want to get everything in here, so let's copy all of it because we exited out of Python. And let's go ahead and make sure that we're all connected here. Okay, all connected there. And let's go ahead and try this again. Oh, this else clause, oh, that looks okay. Everything else looks okay, so let's make sure that all the spacing's good. Copy this and paste it into the terminal there. And there we go. So the HTML text doesn't look that great. It's not as clean as the plain text. Now we could still parse this information, and perhaps there's something with BeautifulSoup we could do a lot more of. But instead what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save the file. This is a little bit more complicated to do, but really also not that complicated. So we've already done a lot of this stuff already, but I'm just going to add in a OS. So import OS, and then I'm going to import meme types. So those two are what I'm going to be using to actually guess, first off, guess the file name extension. So I just put HTML as a default, but that's not what we want. Instead, we want ext equaling to meme types dot guess extension. Not really that complicated, right? So here we do part dot get content type. So it's just guessing whatever the extension is going to be based off of the content type. And we'll say if not ext, then we'll just say ext equals to dot bin. So this is just a kind of a placeholder one. Let's go ahead and get rid of our original one. And this right here just creates our file name. So now our files will work a little bit better. Of course, before you could have just printed out the file name to see what it was, but we're not going to do that. We don't have to worry about that because we're going to save it and see what it is. So now we've got that. Let's actually go ahead and ignore this stuff for a moment. We've got our content type, which is good. That's fine. We don't actually need that down here. We actually don't need it pretty much anywhere because we could have just wrote it up here with the file name, and guess extension should just say guess extension from content type. So now let's save the file. Now, first of all, I want to add a save path. So a path where I want this to actually be saved. So I'm going to do it in os path.join, and I'm going to get os.get current working directory, and I'll say emails, and then inside of emails, I'm going to add just the subject. So the email itself, actually, why don't we add the date as well? So date underscore equals to email message date. So we'll add the date and the subject, and that will be the actual folder or directory that we'll end up putting our parts into, right? So it's getting the date and subject. Now, of course, we could just have it in the date and then everything else comes as a result, but we're just going to leave it in just like this. It kind of makes sense to put it through the date and then the subject versus subject then date, because then when we look in the emails folder, we'll see them all done by date. Okay, so now that we've got that, this is our path that we actually want to save in. So we're going to have to check if that path exists. So we could say by osPath.exists, save path. So this is checking whether or not that path is actually there. And if it's not there, that is, if not that, then we want to make the directory. So we'll do os.make dirs save path. That's it. So that's saving the path. That's actually creating that path for us, whatever this path is, based off of the variables that we have. And then we'll just say with open osPath.join, and this is going to be our save path and our file name. So of course, now it's saying join the file name and the save path. So our save path already exists because we have this call here. And our file name is going to be something that we're adding. And then we're just going to do WB. And we'll do as FP, as in file path or file save. And then we'll just do fp.write. And it's going to be part.get payload. In this case, we're going to just say decode equals to true. And that should actually save our files right where we want them to be. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all this. Go into terminal. And we did not import meme types, so let's make sure we do that. Let's also make sure we import OS. So let's try that again. Copy that and paste it. Subject is also not defined. Oops, we did subject underscore. This is where testing comes in and is very useful. And now it's just going through and it is giving out our actual, let's see, where are we printing something? It might be coming from the actual part or the content type. Okay, so it might also be from the writing process of like the actual size of whatever's in there. So let's actually take a look at our folder now. So we go into desktop, email client, and we've got emails now. So this is a new thing. We look in here and look at what we've got. We actually have emails separated out by date. And in there, we can see the various messages that are coming through. Now, of course, it's not perfect. It's not actually aligning the dates exactly the way we want, right? So it's adding some kind of extra things. We just really want the actual date time stuff. So we could do different things from there, but we see that the SMSs are coming through, and more importantly, we see that the images are coming through as well. So if we look at our HTML, we click on that. Notice, take a look. We have our HTML. Our HTML is actually showing up. So this is that email message. That's exactly what it is on Gmail as well. So if I opened up Gmail, I would see that as well. So here's our plain text. It is showing this. That is probably not the most accurate message, but it is pretty close. Maybe it is accurate. It could be. I think it actually might be. And it's saying C. So if it's plain text, so what we could do in here is we've got this extension, but content type, what I could do here is I'll say if text in content type ext equals to .txt, save that, try it again, and refresh. And now we've got a .txt, and that's probably a little bit more accurate than .c. I'm not sure where that content type came through, but that's nice. We could also do the same sort of stuff with HTML and all that, and just say for sure and do elif HTML in content type, then ext equals to .html, because it's possible that this meme type just guesses the wrong extension. This is just making sure that we do it the way we want it to. Of course, you could change how those things work too, but we still want to guess the extension for the images, so that's where that comes in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this last part down here, or at least comment it out. So if you guys wanted to do more stuff with that, you definitely could. But as far as the plain text is concerned, we're not going through with that. Now, this decode equals to true, that's an optional flag or argument that you could put in. By default, I believe it is false, but that would be checked in the documentation, which is on here. So Python 3 email.message. You can check all of the different things that we did here. And then you can also check out the email examples that they have. And that's actually where we got some of this data for parsing this information. So you'll see it, it's very much the same, but that's because we used it to understand what was going on, and then we were able to actually store our content locally. And do note that it doesn't overwrite what's already there, right? So if I did this again, it's not actually overriding everything, it's just adding to it. Or excuse me, it's gonna just completely ignore it if it's there. But it will modify it if it did change. Okay, so if you guys have any questions on what we did here, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.